back to Spotlight, where we feature the University of Central Arkansas's College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. I'm Donna Lampkin-Stevens. Today I'm joined by my friend, Dr. Wendy Lucas, who is the chair of the History Department at UCA. So, Wendy, it's your first time on Spotlight, so welcome.
Thank you.
So let's, this show has evolved from the old College of Fine Arts and Communication, and so now we're the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, so we're getting to know our new friends and colleagues in the old College of Liberal Arts.
Yes.
So tell us about you, Wendy. You've been here a long time?
I have been here a long time. I got here in 2004.
Okay.
From
where?
From Southern California. So my PhD is from University of Central, I'm sorry, I always say UCA now. University of California at Riverside.
Okay.
And so this is my very first job post my degree. It's the only place I've ever been. So I've been here a long time.
So what, besides getting a job offer, what had you been to Arkansas?
I had never been to Arkansas. My great-grandmother was actually born in Arkansas, which is the kind of funny irony. My family was like, you're going back home. But no, I had never been here. I applied to, I think, 89 jobs the year I was on the market. There were that many jobs I was qualified for. I got 12 job interviews, which was just amazing for any. I did some weird stuff in grad school that I think made me interesting to interview. But I got 2 job offers, and this was one of them. And I actually arrived on the evening. Our department does a reception every year for the history graduates, named after Ophelia Fisher, who was one of the first females who was tenured in our department and who left basically her estate to the department. And so I just happened to arrive on the evening to interview, and that was my meal that I went to.
Oh, that was smart on their
to
part.
Get me because I had been to my undergrad was a small liberal arts college like Hendrix, and we really got to know our professors. We had breakfast at their houses, and I loved that. I loved that one-on-one attention. I loved that they knew who I was. And so I was looking for some place like that. That was where I thought I was going to end up. I didn't think I'd ever end up at a 4-year, big school like this. But listening to all these professors basically introduce these students and know who they were, I thought, okay, here's something I didn't actually think was ever going to be something that existed, right? That they would know their students the way that I didn't expect that they would be able to.
Almost best of both worlds, would you say?
Yeah. And so, the other job offer was just outside Boston, and my husband and I at the time talked and thought like, well, okay, why would we go somewhere where the cost of living was just as high? Here we could basically get a house right away. And I thought the students were very sweet when I talked to them. I really liked the people I thought would be colleagues with me. And so this is what I picked, and I haven't been sorry.
We're glad. So you came. Talk about the weird things you did in graduate school that put you on. What is the PhD emphasis area?
Early American history is my specialty. The University of California system decided that because so many of their surveys are run by teaching assistants, right, as all grad classes are, and that they wanted to make sure, the state legislature wanted to make sure that TAs had been trained, that you had some kind of pedagogical training. And so every single campus has a teaching assistant development program. And so I was my first year in grad school, we weren't allowed to TA. I TA'd that next year, and then I was tapped to come over and be a mentor teaching assistant in that program. And I did that for a year, and then I ran that program until I graduated. And I sat in on all the graduate school meetings, the graduate dean knew me, so I had done this kind of high level of almost like a coordinator, on campus of an interdisciplinary minor or something like that. So I had done that kind of a thing, which just made me different and interesting, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Everything we tell our students, everything that you can do to set yourself apart.
That's right.
To be versatile.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so you came here and entered the tenure track and got tenure. And then what?
Who
was the old chair?
So when a chair hired me that wasn't chair when I arrived on campus. So this is a different story. But Ken Barnes was chair when I arrived, and basically I replaced Ken because he stepped down and I took over. So
How many years later then?
So let's see. So I was graduate coordinator early on, and I was graduate coordinator for a long time until I went to the provost office. I was associate provost over there in charge of assessment and enrollment and international engagement, right, those kinds of things. And I was over there for 2 years, and then I came back to the department as chair.
As department chair. And that was what year?
14.
Okay. So what can you, I mean, I get it. I do journalism history, but what do we have to, what is our message that needs to go out to people about why history is important? I mean, we see it everywhere. But what's our elevator speech?
Yeah, I mean, I think the elevator speech is easier post-pandemic, right? Where you've just seen people paying attention to history, I think, in a way that they had not before. Suddenly everybody knew about the Great Flu epidemic that, people had not really realized, and, things really digging deep into issues of slavery and racism that I think we didn't have kind of in the front of our minds since Black Lives Matter. And one thing I saw a lot on the social media was like, well, we never learned this in history, and we need more history. And I thought, like, you learned it, you just didn't remember it, right? It didn't stick.
Yeah.
And like, yes, I'm all for more history, right? But I mean, I think, there's that famous quote about people who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And I don't know. I mean, historians do think there's some cyclical nature to history, although we're not the predictive science that something like political science or econ is. But I just think, I think if you see the mistakes and the successes that people make in the past, that you're just more formed as you make those decisions moving forward, right? And so it's not so much that, like, well, if we know this, we'll never have the problem again.
Sure.
I don't think that that's the case, and I think a lot of times these great historical events are just a perfect storm of factors that, you couldn't replicate it if you wanted to, because you'd have to get all of these little minute things together, and you just couldn't do it. But I do think if gosh, 3 times this set of parameters has been some source of conflict, you might navigate a similar situation better, right?
Yeah.
I think we've done better if you think about, we have had some presidents who, if it haven't been trained historians, have at least been cognizant and really thought that history was important. And I think those people did a better job because they were aware of that, right? They knew, like, oh, this didn't go so well the last time, I better pay better attention,
Yeah. So tell us about the department. How many faculty, how many students?
So we are 16 faculty now.
Has that typically stayed about the same?
No, when I got here, we had a lot of, so before the general education, right, before the core changed, we were a really world history heavy department.
Oh, okay.
We had tons and tons of adjuncts because every single student who came through the university had to take World History 1 or World History 2. And so when the core changed in 2013, that changed with it, right? And so we have about 1,000 students less every semester come through the department than we did in its heyday. And so all those adjuncts, we just had tons and tons of adjuncts when I got here in world history. They're all gone because we just aren't teaching those many sections anymore.
I mean, I know that there were compromises on this whole core change from the old general education. So what effect can you see? I mean, is it too soon yet to?
I mean, we've lost the SSCH, right, the credit hour production. We've lost the majors because I think that was a big place that we recruited majors from. I think for a lot of people, it's often, the stereotypical coach who teaches high school history, and so I think when they got to college and realized, like, no, history's cool, it's fun, it's, all these people are things I hadn't thought about, things that I hadn't thought about in this way, maybe. We got a lot of majors, and our majors really have dwindled, I think, in result because of that change in the core.
So what is the number now?
We're about, so we've got multiple degrees, right? Because we've got the BSc, so we've got about 75 between our BA and our BS. And then the teacher ed program had kind of hit a little decline and is picking back up again. Okay. So we've got about 15 right now in that program. Okay. And we had a master's program, which is
we're going to talk about that.
Out,
yeah,
so.
That's too bad. Well, what are some of the cool classes and things? What sets our history department apart from the high school? And also other universities.
I think we've got some really cool topics classes. Dr. Welke teaches a history through film, American history through film. I teach a history of witchcraft class, which is very popular. Dr. Smith teaches a class on globalization, also one on sex and politics in East Asia. So he's got some fun stuff there. We've got a kind of a sequence of classes Dr. Cron teaches on the Mediterranean world, right? So if you're kind of interested interested in ancient history, but set in more of a, what's happening around the Mediterranean. So it's not just your kind of Greeks and Romans. So we've got some really cool classes that I think are interesting. Also, a lot of my faculty are trained in reacting to the past, which is a curriculum that started at Barnard College in New York, and it's basically immersive role playing. So you're given a problem. I'll give you the example of a game that I use a lot, which is the Constitutional Convention. And the Constitutional Convention really is a cure for insomnia, right? If you ever are like, I cannot sleep, you go get the text and you read it. So no one ever likes to teach it, and students don't want to read it. It's just not interesting and engaging. So basically, you split your class into 4 factions, right? There's kind of the extremes and then moderates of each faction, and each of them actually is a person who was at a delegate that was at that. And so they have both individual jobs that they're supposed to be doing, tasks that they're supposed to be doing, and then their faction has tasks that they're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of, negotiation. They're buying votes. Some of them don't have enough money to stay, so they've got to sell a vote so that they can stay in the convention. A lot of times your own personal take isn't necessarily aligned with your faction's take, so you've got to decide what you're going to do there, right? Are you going to hold your own personal line, or are you going to make some sacrifices for the faction? And the point of the game is that they're writing a constitution. And I tell them, you're not writing our constitution. Part of the thing is for you to see this didn't have to go the way that it did, right? It could have gone a million other different ways, and let's see what that looks like. And so they just get really into it, and they make speeches, and they have to put forward their different proposals about what they think is going to work, and the students get really sucked in, and they work harder, I think, than they work if they're just on their own. And the professor basically is the game master. So you sit at the back of the class and you don't do anything. The students are running the whole thing, and it's just fun. They just really enjoy it, and they have a good time doing it. And students will ask, like, oh, what's the next one you're doing? Or, like, who else is running one next semester? So
is this, what class would that be in?
So a lot of the upper division classes are running them.
Okay.
And so we've got kind of an attribute that students could look for, I guess. I think you can search in the catalog and find that as an attribute if you're a student. But a lot of the upper division classes are running them, and some of the surveys as well.
Okay. So what, besides just being a better human being and a smarter human being, I think.
Yes.
What kinds of jobs are history majors going into?
There's a lot of jobs out there. There's kind of your typical, of course, teaching, but things like museums, both kind of the curation and, so the archival kind of bend of that, and the actual, more of the front lines, right? The kind of engaging, writing up all of the text that would go with those kinds of things. We have a lot of students at state parks, state park interpreters.
I think we ran into a UCA history alum at the Historic Arkansas Museum a couple years ago, so it was great.
We've got them there. We've got a couple at the National that work both the Clinton Library, both for the Foundation and for the National Archives Records Administration that's there. So we've got them kind of pocketed all over. Interestingly, I haven't checked lately, but for a while, Google had more historians working for them than any other undergraduate degree. Because what we excel in is taking a lot of information and kind of boiling it down and turning it back around, right? The insurance agency, Hartford, employs a ton of historians.
Oh, I would never have thought that.
Because that's what we do, right? We take in all this info and spit it back out again. So, I mean, I think that it's got wide applicability in its skill set.
And I think that's the message we need to get out. So, so we've talked about some of the challenges. What have been some of the challenges besides the move to the lower division corps?
Yeah, move to the lower division corps. We've got some, the state checks in about viability of degrees. And
let's talk about that.
Okay.
So viability does not mean value.
No.
That is a common misconception.
Yes.
So let's put that to bed right now.
Yeah, that is their term, right? That you should put it in quotes, right? It's viability by their standards.
And so what does it mean according to the ADHE, for a program to be viable?
They're looking for a certain amount of students to graduate every year on a 3-year rolling average.
Okay.
And for most undergraduate programs, it's 6.
Okay.
So in a 3-year period, you have to have 18 graduates. They don't care how those come, right? Could have
Could
been
be
all
11,
18 and
yep.
then, right? So, but just
Okay.
so that you have that amount of graduates. And I don't 100% understand. I guess it's that they're trying not to maybe duplicate programs in the state, or if they think like this is a cost-saving way to handle things. So they're just periodically checking, right? This is just somebody's job at the Department of Higher Ed is to go through and say, okay, are all of these programs meeting their viability? And so we've had 2 programs just in this last year that have basically been flagged in the
From the history department.
From the history department.
So let's talk about those.
Okay. So the first is the MA program,
Master of Arts.
Master of Arts in History, which we've had for 30 years now, and it's we.
So is there a different number for a graduate program?
There is a different number
Okay.
for a graduate program.
How many?
I think it's 4.
Okay.
And for a long time, again, I was grad coordinator. This program was vibrant. It had a lot of students. 2008, the recession hit us really hard. It hit all humanities degrees, graduate degrees, really hard. The American Historical Association keeps track of these things, so I was watching all the time and saying like, it's not just us, right? People were coming back to school because they had lost their jobs, but they were thinking about what's going to be a good job that
to be
I
trained
can,
into something.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, that just meant that, they thought that history wasn't going to be a good way to get a job, right?
Which they were wrong.
Which they were wrong, but I mean,
that's the perception,
I can understand that. And so the other complication I think for us is that we have a lot of teachers who are currently teaching in the high schools who come back to get a master's degree because they
need
want more
those.
content,
Yes,
right? I mean,
yes,
and it keeps them up on latest, trends and best practice. I mean, it's really of important value for them to come back and get this kind of stuff. But of course, they only take 1 class every semester, so they're slow to graduate.
So they're not going to get in
They're
the 3-year
not going to
period.
get in the 3-year period.
Or is it 2-year?
Well, it's 2-year for them.
For a
yeah,
master's
and
degree.
so that was the
So how many hours is required for history?
30.
30 hours for
30
the,
hours
for the
for
MA.
the
so,
MA.
So yeah, if you're taking one class a
I mean, you
semester.
could, eke that out. Even if you took one in the summer, right? I mean, it just was
Yeah.
slow going.
So how many are currently enrolled in the program? I mean,
got-
those numbers are there, right?
Those numbers, yeah, right. I mean, we've got 6 in classes right now, but it's just not
They're not going to graduate in
in time.
So that was a blow.
It hit me really hard because I was grad coordinator, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
spent a decade
Yeah.
as grad
Yeah.
coordinator before I left. It was my first love. I was excited to run the program when I got here. It was something I thought was just a way I could contribute, and it hit me real hard.
So when was the decision made, and who made it? I mean, it's numbers, right?
It's numbers, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, I understand that people's hands are tied in this, right? I mean, the university gets memos from ADHE and is basically told, okay, this is what has to happen.
This is the ADHE standard.
That's
it's not
right.
UCA
That's
standard.
right. That's
It's-
right.
Okay.
And I mean, the university doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. I mean, it's
Yeah.
important for them to abide by the agencies above them
Sure.
that they're basically answerable to,
Sure.
right? So we had been working on trying to see if we could get a plan together to save it.
I mean, you knew that the numbers had.
Yes,
So we didn't.
yeah.
But
we
then
were
we've had a
hoping-
pandemic.
That's
and-
right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, everything's been weird in the last 2
Yeah,
years, right? Yeah. So, so I was really hoping we were going to save it. We were trying to pitch a plan to save it, and early on, it looked like maybe that was going to be allowed. That we were going to get a chance to try to see if we could, kind of stave it off. And in December, the dean called and said they'd basically decided, that was not going to be the case.
So we didn't have a chance.
We didn't have a chance.
So what does this mean? The people who are in the program can finish.
Can finish, and then
We
when
just
it's
not-
gone,
we're not admitting any new
That's
ones.
right.
Oh gosh. Is there a chance that it could be resurrected?
I mean, I guess you could. I don't know what you'd have to do. I guess you just have to pitch the thing from scratch again, right? You'd have to just pitch.
So there's no. Okay. So we just have to start it.
You'd have to start it over again, which is a mountain of
Yes,
paperwork.
yes,
But I mean,
yes.
it could be done, right?
Yes.
So
Okay. All right, so that was one program.
That was one program.
And then we have...
The other program is the African American Studies program, which is an interdisciplinary program. It had actually started in English.
I didn't know that.
And came to our department. I'm going to say, I'm trying to think of the year that it came to our department, before I was chair. I'm going to say 2010, maybe it's been in our department
for several
about a
years.
decade. Yeah. And like I said, it is interdisciplinary, right? So the coordinator is housed in our program, but classes are from all over.
Like what sorts of classes?
There's an art class, there's a philosophy class, there's lots of English classes because it started there. So I'm trying to think of some other things.
There's some in the School of Comm.
There are schools in comm. So I mean, they really are. It was a Bachelor of Arts, so most of them were kind of in our current college. But there were some smatterings of other ones in other places. So
what's happened with that?
So it was also flagged for viability, and that program, to be honest, it would never have met the viability threshold. It never was graduating enough people.
I read 13 graduates in 16 years.
16 years.
I mean, nobody's picking on them.
Right. It never had.
Yeah.
So one of the things that also changed in this last year is that the reason why it existed as long as it did without ever being flagged and ever having this happen before.
It had never been warned or anything?
So we knew it was an viability problem, but they were using what they called a cognate, another ADHD term, right? So it wasn't being counted as a standalone degree. It was always being swept in and counted with whatever home degree it was living in, right? So when it lived under English, it was counted with the English degrees, and so it was safe. When it was us, it was counted with our degrees, and so it was safe. So one of the things that ADHD changed this last year was to say there are no more cognates. Every degree has to stand alone and has to meet the viability.
Immediately? That sounds like that could have used
a little leeway.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Warm up period.
A little.
Yeah.
That's right. A little forewarning.
Okay.
And part of the other thing that if you look back at the records is that ADHD, we had already asked sometimes for special things for this program, like programs do a 10-year review for, if you're not accredited, you do that. And so a couple of times we'd put off that review because there weren't enough graduates for us to be able to even say, okay, are our assessments working, right? I mean, we put a new assessment plan forward and we'd had nobody graduate. So it seemed like what was an external review we're in part going to be able to look at if there weren't even graduates to be able to say, does the assessment work, right? So that was the other call that I got. We were working on a plan to see if we could save it. And let me be clear, the MA program is gone. The AAAS program, it was only ever going to be that the major was going to disappear. The minor was always going to exist. That was only the major that they were saying needed to be cut. And in all honesty, that meant all of those classes were still going to be taught because they were interdisciplinary. The only class that we were going to have to cut was the capstone class, right, because of the core. And there were so few people, it was only ever being run as an independent study. And so we could have kept accommodating people, right? I mean, it's not like that would have been a major difference. It's not that all of those classes would have disappeared overnight. So we're trying to see if we could come up with a plan to save it. And got the word that no, they had decided that it just,
and it was the ADHD who decided.
Our campus had to say, yes, we agreed, and we were shutting them down, right? And so...
well, what's bothered me has been the messaging. So can you address that? I mean, everybody finds this major valuable. We don't think it's not valuable.
Right.
But you have to have the numbers.
Right. And what we have uncovered in this, because the university went to ADHD and said, the students are upset, what can be done, and have kind of worked out this deal. One of the things we're going to try to pitch is to ask for a lower threshold, right? Can we have 4 students instead of 6, which they do for some unusual programs. That's not unprecedented. So we think we can ask for that.
But we'll have to graduate 4.
But you'll have to graduate 4.
Yeah, so we have to have 12.
That's right.
In
every
3
3 years. That's right.
Yeah.
And again, we would only have barely made that by the numbers you already
So
quoted.
Wendy, I heard just scuttlebutt across campus that some people think there are 50 majors in this program.
There are not 50 majors in this program.
How many are there?
There are 3 standalone majors and 3 double majors. So a total of 6.
So you're never going to
No.
you're never going to have that unless we get more.
So
how do we get more majors?
You know, I think the thing about a lot of the liberal arts degrees is that we have done a bad job about telling people what the worth of our degrees are and what you can do with them. I think because it's so clear to us that these things have value, right? And if you want to be a well-rounded citizen, all these things, right? That we have just thought, and we know the kind of skills that students come out with, and I think we've done a bad job of letting people know what those are. And I think in this regard, I think the FAM Studies degree is in that same boat, right? What do you do with that degree? And I think probably now more than ever, really post Black Lives Matter, I think actually there are more job opportunities, right? I think companies are hiring diversity officers, and so that's a job that this degree would be really well suited for that didn't exist a decade ago, right? And so I think we can do a better job of telling students what the benefit of this degree is, right? And the kinds of job opportunities that are out there. And I think it really does make a good double major. I think it complements so many of our current existing programs.
So do those double majors count?
They
you get
do.
Credit? Okay,
we do get credit for them.
Okay. So what can we do to address, besides this conversation that we're having now, to get the word out that if students are upset about this, they need to get their friends to be AFAM majors.
Right. That's right.
I mean, all we have to do is get more majors and more graduates, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was something I thought was interesting. You know, as different people have been talking to students who were upset about this, and one of the quotes that came back to me was that students were saying, the administrator who was talking to the students said, well, are you a major? No. Do you know anyone who's a major? No. Are you a minor? No. Do you know anyone who is a minor? No. It's like, okay. Well, this is part of the problem, right? And it's like, well, we want the major to exist, but we aren't in it.
And we aren't supporting
it.
Right?
Except
now,
Yes. So
I think there's been the perception that, I think there was a quote in the Echo, they don't care about us. That's not true.
It's not true.
That's not true.
It's not true.
But we have to have the numbers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, there's a way in which the university's hands are going to be tied, right? I mean, they can't just say to ADHE, like, we don't agree with your rules and we don't want to do them. Right. I mean
that's not going to work.
That doesn't go well. No. So
and all of us. I mean, we're facing that birth rate dive.
That's right.
So that we all need to be thinking about recruiting and so where. We have the Majors Fair on campus.
which the AAAS has always had a table at, and always, in fact, they won Best Award a couple of times for their display. Yes. Yes.
And can we do outreach at high schools? I mean, what are you thinking? And I need to do the same thing.
Actually, the PR students are working with this program to see if they can come up with some ideas. I actually think one of the things that we need to start to do is talk to the students, right, and just say, why aren't you in this major, right? What would you need to know that would make it attractive to you? I mean, for me, that's where I would like to start, is by talking to students to say, what do you think the major is? What do you think, what would be keeping you from taking it on, even as a double major? What would you need to know? What kind of facts would you need to know so that you would know that the program has
value?
So
who do you start that with? Just an open focus group?
Just a focus group, I would think. And like I said, I think these PR students working on it are going to be very helpful.
Good. Well, I hope we can save it.
Yes.
But I also hope that the truth gets out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, Wendy, since now we're all in the same college, and
I know.
Real quickly, what
Yes.
kinds of collaborations can you see with your new colleagues from the old?
I think there's
CFAC?
so many. I'm a huge fan of team talk classes, and I really hope that we will start to do more of that. I've talked to Kevin Brown in theater. A lot of our people who go off to do stuff in the museum world, right? Like a theater class to do some historical reenactment stuff would be perfect and wonderful. I think there's some stuff we could do with journalism students and PR students. Natural things with things like art, and film. I think Harvard actually has a history creative writing a combination.
Oh.
So people who want to write historical fiction
Oh,
are
yeah,
basically,
yeah.
that's what the degree is historical fiction. And we've actually had quite a few creative writers who are history, and that's their
Oh, I
double
like
major.
it, yeah.
And it's fun to see the things that they do
Yeah.
for projects for us,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's just great opportunity. I mean, there's a history of everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
my discipline is at the center of everything. One of the original liberal arts, and so I just think, if you can see how even just the history of your discipline interacts with what you're doing, right? Where did your discipline come from? How did it evolve? Those things are also interesting.
And our college was born in the middle of the pandemic.
It was born in the middle of the pandemic.
So we hope we have lots of time to forge these ways to work together, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
I am
So.
too.
Well, Wendy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back again to talk more
Okay.
about exciting things.
Okay.
And join us again next time for Spotlight.